She handed me that dirty mop right there in front of everybody. 8 guests sitting around my table, my son carving the turkey, laughter still hanging in the air, and then silence. The sound of that mop hitting the floor was louder than any scream. I looked down at it, dripping brown water, bits of food floating at the end like it had been used on the back porch. "Stop pretending you're sick, Mama," she said. Her voice was sharp, high, proud. "If you can sit here and eat 3 slices of pie, you can help clean this floor." The air went cold. My hand was still on my plate, the fork trembling a little. Nobody moved. My nephew looked at his wife. My grandbaby's eyes got wide. I could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. And then my own son said it. He did not even look at me when he said it. "You eat for free, so start cleaning, Mama." That sentence cut straight through me. My boy, the same boy I used to rock to sleep when I could not afford diapers, the same one I walked 2 miles every morning to get to school, because we could not afford the bus pass, my only son. I swallowed hard and looked around that table. Tiffany's friends were grinning into their glasses of wine, pretending not to hear. The turkey smelled rich, buttery, like the old holidays when we used to be a family. But I could not taste a thing. I just smiled the way old folks do when they realize the respect in the room has died a quiet death. "I see," I said softly. My voice did not shake. "Well, let me get right to it then." I stood up slow, every bone in my knees cracking like old wood. I reached for that mop still dripping on the floor. I held it for a second. That stick felt heavier than anything I had ever carried. I looked at my son, at that woman he married, and then I set it right back down. "No," I said. You could have heard a pin drop. Tiffany blinked like she did not understand the word. Marcus froze halfway to the sink. "What did you say?" she asked. I looked her dead in the eyes. I said no. I am not cleaning anything. Marcus sighed like I was being dramatic. "Mama, do not start. You know Tiffany is stressed. She has been cooking all day." I turned to him. "Boy, I have been cooking for 35 years of my life. You never saw me talk to anyone this way." Tiffany rolled her eyes. "Here we go again, the guilt trips. You play that sick mama card too well." That is when I felt something inside me twist. It was not anger at first, it was disbelief. The kind of disbelief that makes you quiet, because you realize it is over. You realize the people you love have stopped seeing you. I picked up my glass of water, took a sip, and put it down. "Y'all enjoy your dinner," I said. "I have lost my appetite." I walked out of that dining room slow. Nobody followed me. Nobody asked if I was all right. The laughter started again after a few minutes, light and fake, as if they were forcing it back into the air. I could hear Tiffany giggling about something in the kitchen. I climbed those stairs one at a time. Every step reminded me that I did not belong in that house anymore. My room. Well, they called it my room, but it felt more like a spare corner of somebody else's life. The smell of bleach from Tiffany's cleaning sprays always lingered. My quilt was folded neatly at the edge of the bed, and on the dresser was my bottle of arthritis medicine that she had once called your excuse pills. I sat down on the bed and stared at my hands. They shook, not from weakness, but from something deeper. I thought about how, just 3 years ago, I had that stroke and Marcus told me, "Mama, come live with us. We'll take care of you." Those words felt safe back then. I had believed him. I had believed them both. Now, sitting in that cold little room, I realized I had traded my independence for humiliation. Outside, I could still hear their voices, the clinking of plates, the sound of a cork popping, my grandbaby's laughter, sweet, innocent, cut through everything, and it made my chest ache. I looked over at the little wooden cross hanging by the window. It had been in every house I ever lived in. I whispered, "Lord, give me strength." Then I stood up and opened my closet. My suitcase was still in there, the same one I had used when I first moved in. It was dusty, sitting behind some of Tiffany's old boxes. I pulled it out. The zipper stuck halfway, but I got it open. As I folded my clothes, I could feel tears sliding down my face, slow and hot. I did not sob. I did not make a sound. I had learned a long time ago that tears do not change people. They only clear your vision. I packed my Sunday dress, the one Marcus bought me for church. I folded my robe, my Bible, and my old photographs. One picture stopped me. A little boy standing in front of a broken tricycle, missing a tooth, smiling at the camera like the world was his. My baby, my boy. I held that picture against my heart for a moment. "What happened to you, Marcus?" I whispered. "What did she do to you?" I placed it in the suitcase carefully, like it was something fragile that might disappear if I looked away. Downstairs, someone opened the front door. More laughter. "Probably the neighbors coming in for dessert," I heard Tiffany say. "She went upstairs sulking again. I swear she loves attention." That was it. That was the final nail. I zipped the suitcase all the way, slow and steady. I looked around that small room one last time. Everything in there smelled like their detergent, their candles, their noise. Nothing in that house smelled like me anymore. Before leaving, I found a notepad on the desk. I tore off one sheet and wrote one sentence. "Take care of your house." I folded it in half and placed it right on the kitchen counter, where she would see it in the morning. The clock on the wall said 11:43. The wind outside was sharp, whistling through the old windows. I put on my coat, wrapped my scarf, and stood at the front door for a long moment. My hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling a little. Then I heard Marcus's voice from the dining room, soft, almost laughing. "She will come around. She always does." And Tiffany's voice followed. "Let her. Maybe this time she will finally learn her place." I opened that door and stepped out into the cold. The night air hit my face like freedom. The moon was hanging low, pale and heavy. I pulled the suitcase behind me down that long driveway, every step echoing against the pavement. For the first time in years, I did not feel weak. I did not feel small. I felt alive, and though I did not know exactly where I was going, I knew one thing for certain. I was never coming back to that house again. But what I did the next morning, the thing that would make them pale with fear, was already taking shape in my mind as I walked away into the night. The night was cold, quiet, and full of thoughts that would not leave me alone. I sat at the bus stop for a while with that suitcase beside me, watching the streetlights blink like tired eyes. My breath rose in little clouds, fading into the dark. I did not cry. I just sat there, holding my coat tight around my shoulders, wondering how a mother could raise a man, love him with all her strength, and still end up standing in the cold like a stranger outside his house. After a while, I stood up and called a cab. The driver was a young man with kind eyes. He did not ask questions. He just looked at me through the mirror and said, "You all right, ma'am?" I nodded. "I will be." When we reached the small motel near the edge of town, I handed him a few crumpled bills and thanked him. My fingers hurt from the cold, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. Inside that little motel room, the heater buzzed softly, and the air smelled faintly of old soap and pine cleaner. I set the suitcase on the bed and sat beside it. I began unpacking, slow and careful, folding everything neatly like I always did. Each piece of clothing held a memory. My favorite cardigan, The one Marcus bought me after my stroke. Still had his smile stitched into the seams. I held it against me, then folded it tight and placed it back. Some things you keep, even when they hurt. As I worked, my mind started walking backward, tracing every step that led me here. The first day I moved into their house after the hospital, Tiffany had hugged me so tight I almost believed she meant it. She said, "You are family, Mama. We got you." She cooked that night. Baked chicken, mashed potatoes, sweet tea just how I liked it. For a while I really thought I was safe. But people can fool you with kindness when they have plans you cannot see yet. I remembered how, little by little, Tiffany started deciding things for me. She would say, "Mama, let me organize your pills. You do not need to worry." Or, "I will handle your mail. You should rest." At first it felt like care, but soon I started noticing my letters went missing. Bills that used to come to my name stopped arriving. She said she had set everything up for convenience. That word started to sound like a cage. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the heater. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that my biggest mistake had not been trusting them. It was staying silent too long. When you are a mother, you keep forgiving. You tell yourself your children are tired. They are stressed. They do not mean the words that cut you. But silence turns into permission, and permission turns into disrespect. I sat up and took out the little envelope I kept in my purse. Inside were a few papers, my old bank documents, some property forms, and a copy of the house deed. I opened them one by one. My name was still on that deed, sitting there like a hidden truth. Marcus had never looked too closely. Tiffany, she thought she was clever, but she never checked the fine print. A soft smile crept across my face, not the kind born from joy, but from clarity. "Take care of your house," I had written. They thought it was a goodbye note. They had no idea what kind of house they were about to take care of. I placed the papers on the nightstand and leaned back again. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Each tick felt like a heartbeat, reminding me I still had time to decide how this story would end. But before that decision came, I needed rest. My body ached all over. My hands were stiff, my legs sore from walking. I closed my eyes and tried to remember better days. I saw Marcus as a little boy, sitting on the kitchen floor, banging pots and pans together like a drum. I used to laugh so hard at the noise. He would say, "Mama, I am making music for you." And I would tell him, "Then play it loud, baby. Let the world hear it." Those memories were bright, golden things, until I thought of how far we had drifted. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was peeking through the blinds, painting stripes of light on the floor. The world looked calm again. I made myself a cup of weak motel coffee and sat by the window. Outside, people were going about their lives, unaware that somewhere, a mother had just walked away from everything she built. I reached for my phone, hesitating for a moment before dialing a number I had not called in months. My old friend, Clara. She picked up on the second ring. "Lord have mercy, Helen. Is that you?" Her voice was warm, full of the same kindness I had been starving for. I took a breath. "It is me, Clara. I am fine. Just needed a place to think for a few days." She went quiet for a moment, then said softly, "It happened, did it not?" "Yes," I whispered. "It did." "You come stay here," she said. "You know I always got room. You do not need to be out there alone." I thanked her, but told her I needed a little time. I was not ready to talk about what happened. Not yet. I just wanted to breathe without feeling watched. After hanging up, I took out my little notebook, the one I always kept in my purse. I wrote down 3 words at the top of a blank page. Take it back. That was my plan now. To take back what was mine, not out of revenge, but out of dignity. All morning I sat there thinking about the years I had spent building a life for Marcus. When his father left, I worked double shifts at the nursing home. I used to fall asleep on the bus, wake up 2 stops past my stop, then walk back in the dark just to get him ready for school. Everything I had ever owned, every bit of love I had to give, went into that boy's future, and now that same boy had stood by while his wife handed me a mop. I thought about going back, knocking on that door, and demanding an apology. But I knew better. Some lessons are not taught with words. They are taught with silence and with absence. So instead, I called my bank. The woman on the line was polite, cheerful even. I asked her a few questions, checked a few balances, confirmed a few signatures. When I hung up, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. It would take time. It would take patience. But I had both. The day slipped by slowly. I took a nap, then went for a short walk near the motel. The air smelled of dry leaves and faint smoke from someone's chimney. I watched a little boy ride his bike down the sidewalk, his mother calling after him to slow down. For a moment I smiled. Then I felt that old ache again, the ache of remembering when love was simple. That night I packed my things again, not because I was running, but because I was ready to move forward. I had made my choice. As I zipped the suitcase, I glanced at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were tired but clear. I whispered to myself, "You are not broken. Helen, you are just finished." I turned off the light, sat on the bed, and whispered another prayer. This time not for strength, but for peace. Before I drifted to sleep, I thought of Tiffany and Marcus sitting at that same dinner table. Maybe wondering where I had gone, maybe laughing it off, maybe feeling a little guilt, or maybe none at all. Either way, by morning, they were going to learn that the woman they tried to humiliate was not as powerless as they believed, because while they were busy mocking me, I had already begun to take everything back. There was a time when my house was filled with laughter, when the walls were still warm with love, and every sound that came out of Marcus's mouth made me proud. Before Tiffany, before the sickness, before all the sharp words that sliced through years of motherhood, there was peace. I still remember the day Marcus brought Tiffany home for the first time. It was a Sunday afternoon in late spring. The azaleas out front were blooming bright pink, and the air smelled like rain that had already passed. He walked in grinning from ear to ear, holding her hand like he had just caught sunlight. "Mama," he said, "this is Tiffany. She's the one I told you about." She stepped forward, smiling that big, pretty smile. Her nails were done, her dress soft yellow like sunshine. "It's so good to finally meet you, Mrs. Thompson," she said. "Marcus talks about you all the time." I liked her instantly. There was something polite about the way she looked at me. Respectful, even. I remember thinking, maybe my son has found himself a good woman. I invited them to stay for dinner. She offered to help, but I told her no. Guests do not work on their first visit. She sat with me in the kitchen, talking about her job at the bank, her family back in Georgia, her dreams of having a big house full of children. I liked how she said "we" when she talked about the future. It made me think she really loved my son. When Marcus married her the following year, I cried happy tears. The wedding was small, just close family. I wore a light blue dress and a hat I borrowed from Clara. Everyone said the couple looked like a magazine picture. Young, bright, and full of plans. I stood in that church pew and thanked God for blessing my boy with love. For the first few years, things were good. They visited every Sunday after church. Tiffany would bring homemade cornbread, and Marcus would fix whatever was broken around the house. They laughed together, finishing each other's sentences, like they were meant to be. When I had my first mild stroke, Tiffany was the first one at the hospital. She brought me a blanket and a soft scarf. She said, "Do not you worry, Mama. We'll take care of you." I believed her. After I was released, they insisted I move in with them. I said no at first. I wanted to stay independent, but Tiffany kept saying, "It'll be easier for everyone. You won't be alone if something happens." So I said yes. I sold my little house, the one I had worked all my life to buy, and I gave Marcus the money for a down payment on a bigger home for them. I told him, "As long as there's room for Mama, I'll be happy." He hugged me and promised, "You'll always have a place with us." For the first few months it was sweet. Tiffany made me breakfast in the mornings. Oatmeal with cinnamon, just the way I liked it. Marcus would stop by my room before work, kiss my forehead, and say, "Love you, Mama." I thought my prayers had been answered. But then, little things started changing. Small things at first. Things you almost do not notice until they pile up. One morning I walked into the kitchen, and Tiffany was whispering on the phone. When she saw me, she jumped and said, "Oh, it's just Mama. I'll call you back." She hung up too fast, smiling like nothing happened. I told myself not to be nosy. Then came the talk about groceries. She said, "Mama, could you start giving me some money for food? It's getting expensive feeding 3 people." I was surprised, but I agreed. I gave her cash every week. But somehow, the pantry started looking emptier. I asked Marcus about it once, and he said, "Tiffany's managing things now, Mama. Let her handle it." That was when I noticed she started locking certain drawers in the kitchen. She said it was for organization. I brushed it off. She was young. Maybe she just liked things neat. Then one afternoon, my friend Clara came to visit. We were sitting in the living room, catching up over tea, when Tiffany came home from work. She did not greet Clara. She just looked at us and said, "Mama, next time you invite people, can you please ask first? I had a long day, and I do not want noise." Clara looked at me with wide eyes. I laughed it off and said, "She's tired, baby." But when Tiffany went upstairs, Clara leaned in and whispered, "You sure you're all right living here?" At the time, I still defended her. I told everyone she was a blessing, that she was just adjusting. I even told Marcus how proud I was of her. But deep down, something small started stirring in my chest, a little seed of unease. One evening I noticed that my medication bottle was half empty. I knew how many pills I had left because I kept count every week. I asked Tiffany about it, and she said, "Oh, I moved them to the cabinet so the grandbaby wouldn't get into them." But when I checked, the bottle was still missing. I let it go, telling myself it was just a mistake. Then, one day I overheard her on the phone again. She was talking to someone, whispering, "I cannot wait till we get our own space. Once she's gone, everything will be easier." The way she said, "once she's gone," made my stomach twist. That night, I could not sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it. Maybe she was talking about a vacation, or maybe she just meant privacy. But my heart knew better. Marcus started acting strange, too. He came home quieter, avoiding eye contact. When I asked if something was wrong, he said, "No, Mama, just tired." The warmth that used to live in that house began to fade. The laughter was still there, but it sounded different. Forced, almost like it was covering something else. One Sunday morning, I heard them arguing in the kitchen. Tiffany was saying, "She cannot stay here forever. This is our home." And Marcus replied, "She has nowhere else to go, Tiff." I stood behind the door, my hands shaking. I did not want to hear more, but I could not walk away. She said, "Then she can move into a nursing home. You said yourself she's getting worse." Marcus was silent for a long time before he said quietly, "Maybe you're right." That broke something inside me. After that day, every kindness Tiffany showed me felt like a performance. Every "good morning, Mama" sounded rehearsed. She still smiled, but her eyes never did. I started staying in my room more. I stopped joining them for dinner, telling them I was tired. Truth was, I just could not stand sitting at that table pretending everything was all right. Sometimes, when the house was quiet, I would look at that wedding photo of them smiling so bright, and I would wonder when the light went out. I would ask myself what I had done wrong, what moment had turned my son's heart away from me. But no answer ever came. All I knew was that the home I once helped build with love had become a place where I was tolerated, not cherished, and that sweet young woman who once called me Mama had turned into someone who could look at me and see only burden. The cracks were spreading, slow and silent. I could feel the distance growing between us like a wall I could not climb. And deep down I knew something was coming, something I could not yet name, but it was moving toward me, one small cruelty at a time. It was about 3 weeks after that Thanksgiving dinner, and the house still carried a kind of silence that I could not explain. You know that quiet that creeps in when people are pretending to be fine, but their hearts are not settled? That was the kind of quiet living inside my son's home. Every time I walked into the kitchen, I could feel eyes shift away. Every whisper felt like it stopped the moment I appeared. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head. I told myself, "Why, Mary, you are being sensitive." But deep down, I knew something had changed. I knew that Thanksgiving night did something to our family. One morning, I woke up early to make breakfast. Old habits are hard to break. I had been the one to make Sunday breakfasts since my children were small. So even though I was living under my son's roof now, I still wanted to help. I started frying bacon, whisking eggs, and humming one of those old Mahalia Jackson hymns. Then she came in. My daughter-in-law, Kendra. Her steps were slow, her arms folded across her chest. She leaned on the doorway and said, "You did not have to do that, you know." I smiled, trying to keep things gentle. "I know, baby. But I just wanted to make breakfast for y'all. Smells nice, does it not?" She sighed, not even looking at me. "It smells fine. But we do not eat bacon anymore. We are trying to live healthier." I stopped stirring for a moment. "Oh, I did not know that. I will make something else." Kendra shook her head. "It is all right. My husband and I will grab something later. You can keep it for yourself." Then she walked out before I could even answer. I stood there, the pan still sizzling, and I felt that same heaviness pressing on my chest again. It was not about the bacon. It was about the tone, the coldness, the distance. A few hours later, my son came home from the store. I greeted him with a smile and said, "Morning, baby. I made breakfast, but your wife said y'all are eating different now." He did not look up from his phone. "Yeah, Ma, we are trying to change some things around here. It would help if you asked before cooking." "Asked?" I repeated, trying to make sure I heard right. "You mean ask before I make breakfast?" "Yeah," he said, still scrolling. "It is just easier that way. You know, so we do not waste food." I wanted to laugh, but the tears were already gathering in my throat. I nodded, pretending I understood. "All right, baby. I can do that." That was how it started. The slow shifting of power in my own child's home. Every week something new would change. At first, it was small things. Kendra would remind me not to leave my cup in the sink. Then she said I should not use her towels. Then it became, "Please do not use the upstairs bathroom, Mama. It is for us." I tried to keep peace. I tried to tell myself that maybe I was being too old-fashioned, too set in my ways. But I was not blind. I could see how her face softened only when my son walked in the room. She could turn her coldness into sweetness in a second. One evening I overheard them talking in the kitchen. I was sitting quietly in the den, pretending to read my Bible. Kendra said, "She makes me feel like a guest in my own house. Every time I come in, she has something cooking, or she is rearranging something." My son said, "War, she is just trying to help, babe." "Help?" Kendra snapped. "By making a mess? By acting like she owns the place? You do not see it because you are her son. But she is trying to control things." There was silence. And then my son sighed. "I will talk to her." That sentence hit me like a cold wind. I will talk to her. It was not anger I felt in that moment. It was sorrow. The kind that makes your hands tremble, not because you are scared, but because you realize something sacred is slipping away. The next day, he did talk to me. He came into my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and tried to sound calm. "Ma, Kendra feels uncomfortable sometimes. She says you're doing too much around the house." I folded my hands in my lap and asked, "Doing too much? You mean cooking? Cleaning? Helping?" He looked down. "She just wants to feel like this is her home too. You have been here a while now, and maybe we just need some boundaries." That word, boundaries, echoed in my head like a church bell. I had never thought I would hear my own child say that to me. "All right, baby," I said softly. "If boundaries will keep peace in your house, then that is what we will have." After that, I pulled back. I stayed in my room more often. I stopped cooking, stopped folding laundry, stopped asking what they wanted for dinner. I became like a quiet shadow in my son's house. And the strange thing is that was when they both started acting sweeter. Kendra would knock on my door and ask if I wanted some tea. My son would ask how I was feeling. But it all felt rehearsed, like they were being kind out of guilt, not love. One evening, Kendra came in with that same polite smile. "Mama, we are thinking of rearranging some things in the guest room. You have been using it for a while, but we might need that space soon." I looked at her, unsure what she meant. "You mean you want me to move?" "Oh no, nothing like that," she said quickly. "Just a few changes. We might bring in some of our storage, for organization." But I could read between her words. I had lived too long not to. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized what was really happening. They were trying to make me feel like a guest. Slowly, politely, and without ever saying it outright. I turned off the lamp and whispered to myself, "They do not want me here anymore." That was the moment the quiet turned into something else. Not sadness, not even anger. It was awareness, the kind that wakes you up in the middle of the night and tells you the truth you have been too afraid to see. And that truth was simple. My son was slipping away from me, one boundary at a time. By the end of that week, something small but strange happened. My medication went missing. Just one bottle. But it was enough to worry me. When I asked Kendra about it, she smiled and said, "Oh, I must have moved it when I cleaned the counter. I will check." But she never did. That was when I began to realize this was not just coldness. This was control, and it had only just begun. It was the middle of December when the first real crack opened wide enough for me to see the truth. The days had grown shorter, the air sharper, and Christmas lights had started glowing on every house on our street. But inside that house where my son and his wife lived, the warmth felt false, like a smile stretched too far. I remember that morning clear as day. I woke up to the smell of coffee and voices downstairs. For a moment I thought maybe things were changing. Maybe we were finding our way back to each other. I slipped on my robe, brushed my hair, and went to join them. But when I stepped into the kitchen, I froze. Kendra was standing there, her voice low but sharp. Across from her was my son, sitting at the table with his head in his hands. "She cannot stay here forever," she was saying. "You know it, I know it. This house is not big enough for all of us." My son sighed. "Kendra, she has nowhere else to go right now. She has friends, church people, somebody," she snapped. "I am tired of walking on eggshells in my own home. You are choosing her comfort over your marriage." I felt my breath catch. For a second, I thought about turning back upstairs, pretending I had not heard a thing. But my foot scraped the floor, and Kendra's eyes shot up, catching mine. The room went silent. She smiled then. Sweet. Practiced. "Good morning, Mama. We were just talking about the grocery list." I stood there staring at her. "Is that what you were talking about, baby?" My son looked at me then, his face tired. "Ma, can we talk for a minute?" That was when I knew something was coming. Something I would not be able to forget. We sat down in the living room. Kendra stayed standing, her arms crossed. My son cleared his throat and said, "Ma, we have been thinking. You have been here almost a year now, and we love having you. But maybe it is time you think about getting your own place." Those words felt like a punch to my chest. I blinked, trying to make sure I had heard right. "My own place?" He nodded, not looking me in the eye. "Yeah, you know, something close by. We can help you find a small apartment, somewhere peaceful." I wanted to ask him why. I wanted to remind him that I raised him, that I wiped his nose, packed his lunches, prayed over him every night. But the words would not come. I just sat there, holding my hands together so tight they trembled. Kendra spoke next. "It is not personal, Mama. It is just, we need our space. You deserve your own too, not personal. That is what people say right before they stab you, with something that cuts deep." I said quietly, "Baby, I do not have the money for that kind of move right now." Kendra's face softened, but it was the kind of softness that does not reach the heart. "Oh, we know. But you have that small savings from your insurance, right?" That was when I looked up. "How do you know about that?" My son looked startled. I told her, "We were just trying to figure out how to help." That was it. The first real betrayal. My son had told his wife about my savings. Something I had kept private. Something I had only mentioned once to him, when I thought I could trust him completely. I said slowly, "I see. So you told her about my money?" He started to speak, but I raised my hand. "No, let me finish. You told her, and now you both think I should take that little bit I have and use it to move out." Kendra tried to speak, but I turned to her. "You know, when I first met you, I prayed for you. I asked God to bless you, to help you and my son build a strong marriage. But baby, strong marriages are not built on pushing people out." Her face tightened, and she said, "This is not about pushing anyone out. It is about moving forward." I stood up, my hands shaking. "Then I guess your way of moving forward means leaving the woman who gave him life behind." My son got up too, his voice soft. "Ma, please, do not make this harder." I laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because it was the only way to keep from crying. Harder? Baby, you have no idea what hard is. Hard was raising you when your father left. Hard was working 2 jobs so you could go to college. Hard was watching you forget where you came from. He did not say a word. The silence between us was heavy, like years of love suddenly gone hollow. That night, I sat on my bed and looked through the small box I kept under it. Inside was everything that reminded me of who I was before this house. My church badge, a few photos, a letter from my late husband, and that little savings book. And you know what hurt most? It was not that my son betrayed my trust. It was that he did it so easily, like it did not even register as wrong. The next morning, Kendra came to my door with that same polite tone she always used. "Mama, I hope you're not upset. We really are trying to do what is best for everyone." I looked at her and said, "Kendra, baby, the thing about doing what is best for everyone is, it only works if everyone agrees on what best means." She stood there quiet for a while, then turned and walked away. That day, I noticed something else missing from my nightstand. My jewelry box. It was not much. Just a few earrings, a necklace from my mother, and my old wedding ring. I looked everywhere for it. When I asked Kendra if she had seen it, she said, "Oh, I think I moved it when I was cleaning again. You leave things all over sometimes." But I knew that was a lie. I knew because I had hidden that box inside my drawer, under some scarves. I said nothing. I just nodded. That evening, my son came home with takeout and tried to act normal, laughing and talking like nothing had happened. I smiled and went along with it. But inside, I was watching both of them closely. Later that night, after they went to bed, I sat by the window and looked out at the cold streetlights. My reflection stared back at me, older, tired, but not defeated. That was when I realized something important. I had spent too long being quiet, too long letting other people decide my worth. They thought they were slowly pushing me out, but they did not know that I had a few lessons left to teach. I whispered to myself, "You may have taken my kindness for weakness, but you will soon learn the difference." And from that night on, I started watching everything. Every word, every move, every whisper behind closed doors. Because when someone betrays you like that, you stop waiting for peace. You start preparing for truth. And I knew, deep in my bones, that the truth was coming. The days after that conversation felt longer than winter nights. Every sound in that house seemed louder. The closing of a cabinet, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of their laughter behind a half-shut door. It was as if the walls themselves were reminding me that I did not belong anymore. One morning I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. My hands were wrapped around the mug, but I did not drink. I just stared out the window at the frost gathering along the edges of the glass. My mind kept circling back to the same thought. How did we get here? How did my own son become a stranger under the same roof? When he came downstairs, I looked up and said softly, "Baby, can we talk for a minute?" He hesitated before sitting across from me. His eyes were tired, guarded. "What is it, Ma?" I took a breath. "I just want to understand. Did I do something wrong? Did I overstep?" He rubbed his forehead. "It is not about that. It is just different now. You know, I have a wife, a family. Things change." I nodded slowly. "I understand that. But love should not change that way. Love should not make a mother feel like a burden." He looked away. "It is not like that." "Then what is it like?" I asked quietly. Because from where I am sitting, it feels like I went from raising you to being in your way. He sighed, pushing back from the table. I do not want to argue. I wanted to reach out, grab his hand, remind him of all the nights I stayed awake praying for him when he was sick, the mornings I walked him to school in the rain, the times I told him he could be anything. But he stood up before I could say another word. I have to go to work, he said, his voice low, and just like that, he was gone. The sound of that door closing behind him felt final, like something sacred had just broken in two. I sat there long after he left. I thought about packing my bags right then and there, but where would I go? Who would take me in? That night I could not sleep. The wind was howling outside, and the house creaked like it was grieving with me. Around midnight I got up and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. When I opened the fridge, I noticed something strange. My food containers were gone. The soup I had made. The little bits of leftovers I had kept. All gone. I opened the trash, and there it was. Everything I had cooked, thrown away. I stood there staring at it, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Kendra's voice floated through the dark. Oh, Mama, I forgot to tell you. Some of that food was expired. I did not want anyone to get sick. Her voice was light, but her eyes told another story. I said quietly, You could have asked me first. She shrugged. It was just old food. No big deal. I nodded slowly, then turned and walked back to my room. But once I closed the door, the tears finally came. They came hard, the kind that shake your whole body. I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from making a sound. I did not want to give them the satisfaction of hearing me break. When the crying stopped, a strange calm came over me. Not peace. No, peace was gone by then. This was something else. Something quiet and cold. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the picture of my son when he was a boy. Smiling wide, missing one front tooth. Holding my hand, I whispered, Where did you go, baby? Where did my child go? For the next few days, I moved like a ghost in that house. I stopped trying to talk, stopped trying to fix things. I kept to myself, did my chores in silence, prayed quietly before bed, but inside something heavy was growing. On Sunday morning, I woke up and tried to get ready for church. When I came out of my room dressed in my blue coat, Kendra looked up from the couch and said, Oh, Mama, you do not have to rush. We already went to early service. I blinked. You went without me? She smiled. We did not want to wake you. You looked so tired. That was it. The small, cruel gestures dressed up as kindness. They were cutting me off from everything, piece by piece. When they came back from brunch later that day, I was sitting at the dining table with my Bible open. My son walked in, gave me a quick hug, and said, Ma, you look nice today. Sorry we did not tell you about the service. I looked up at him, my voice trembling. You do not have to be sorry, baby. I see what is happening. He frowned. What do you mean? I closed the Bible and said softly, Your wife is trying to make me leave, and you are letting her. He shook his head quickly. That is not true. Yes, it is, I said, my voice breaking. She moved my things, threw away my food, told me I do not belong here. And you sit there pretending you do not see it. You think I do not notice how quiet you get every time she looks your way? You are afraid of her being unhappy, so you let her turn your mother into a stranger. He did not answer, and that silence, that was worse than any words he could have said. I felt something inside me snap, not in anger, but in sorrow, the kind of sorrow that hollows you out until nothing is left but quiet. I stood up, tears falling freely now. You can have your peace, baby. You and your wife. I will not disturb your home anymore. I went back to my room, closed the door, and started folding my clothes into my old suitcase. Each shirt, each pair of socks felt like a small goodbye. Then I stopped. My hands froze midair. I looked around that little room. The bedspread I had bought, the small lamp I always turned on to read, the photo of my husband on the nightstand, and something deep in my spirit whispered, "Do not leave yet." I sat down on the bed, hands trembling. That was when the anger finally came. Not loud, not wild, but quiet and steady. The kind of anger that feels like a prayer whispered through clenched teeth. I said out loud, "They think I am weak because I am quiet. They think kindness means blindness, but they will see. God sees everything, and so will they." The moonlight spilled across the floor, soft and silver. I sat there for a long time listening to the house breathing around me. And that was the night I made my decision. I would not run. I would not beg. I would not cry another tear where they could see it. No, I would stay, watch, and wait. Because something inside me knew. The truth always rises, no matter how deep people try to bury it. And when it does not just come quietly. It comes with a cost. It was just a few days before Christmas when everything finally came to a head. The air in that house was so thick, you could almost feel it pressing on your chest. Every word, every glance had weight to it. You know when people smile at you, but you can see the dislike hiding behind their eyes? That was how it had been for weeks. The morning started like any other. I was in the living room dusting the shelves, taking my time with it the way older hands do. Slow, careful, with a kind of patience that younger folks forget. My son was at work. Kendra was upstairs talking on the phone. I could hear her laughter echoing down the stairs. That light, pretty sound she used when she wanted something. Then I heard her footsteps, fast and sharp. She came down holding her phone, her face tight with irritation. "Mama," she said. "Did you move the mail again?" I turned to her calmly. "No, baby, I have not touched anything today." "Well, there were papers here. Bills, a few forms. And now they are gone. You must have moved them when you were cleaning." I looked her in the eye. "I do not move what does not belong to me." She crossed her arms. "I am just saying you have been rearranging things a lot lately. It is hard to keep track." Her tone had that edge again. The same one she used at Thanksgiving. The same one that made me feel small in my own child's presence. But something in me was different now. I set down the rag I was holding and said softly, "Kendra, baby, we need to talk." She looked surprised. "About what?" "About how you have been treating me," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart was pounding. "About how you walk around this house acting like I am some visitor who overstayed her welcome." Her eyes narrowed. "That is not fair." "No," I said. "What is not fair is the way you talk to me. The way you look at me like I am in your way. I have done my best to respect you, to give you your space. But what you have been doing is not about space. It is about control." She laughed under her breath. "Control? Mama, you are imagining things." I took a small step closer. "Am I? Then tell me why my medication went missing. Tell me why my jewelry box disappeared. Tell me why the food I cooked ended up in the trash." Her eyes flickered for just a moment, that quick flash of guilt that people show when they are caught. But she recovered fast. "I do not know what you are talking about. Maybe you misplaced it." "I have been alive long enough to know when someone is lying to my face," I said. Her lips pressed together. "You are being dramatic. I felt something rise in me then. Not rage, but strength. The kind that only comes after years of holding your tongue. No, Kendra, I have been silent. That is not the same as dramatic. But silence can only hold so much. She sighed, rolling her eyes. You are just looking for someone to blame. Maybe you feel guilty because you have been living here too long. I looked at her carefully. Do you really think that is what this is about? That I am some old woman trying to stay where I am not wanted? She folded her arms tighter, saying nothing. I nodded slowly. You remind me of myself when I was your age. Proud, sharp-tongued, thinking love meant getting your way. But let me tell you something, baby. Love that needs to push others down to feel strong will not last long, she scoffed. Are you threatening me now? No, I said. I am warning you. She looked at me, confused. About what? I took a breath, my voice low but steady. About what happens when a woman's heart breaks too many times. Because one day when you least expect it, the same thing you did to me might be done to you. And you will remember this moment. She tried to hold her expression, but her face changed. Just a flicker of unease, a shadow of guilt. Then she turned to walk away, muttering, You need to stop living in the past, Mama. But before she could climb those stairs, I said, I am not living in the past, Kendra. I am remembering who I am. That evening, when my son came home, I was sitting in the den with the lights low and the fireplace burning. I had made sweet tea and set 2 cups on the table. When he walked in, he smiled, surprised. Ma, this looks nice. Sit down, baby, I said softly. We need to talk. He hesitated but sat. I handed him his cup and waited until he took a sip. You have been different lately, I said. Not mean, not cold. Just distant. And I understand that you are married now, that your wife comes first. But do not let that mean you forget where you came from. He sighed. Ma, I am not forgetting. You are, I said gently. And I am not saying that to hurt you. I am saying it because I love you. Because I see what is happening. You think you are keeping peace. But all you are doing is letting someone else speak for you. He frowned. That is not fair to Kendra. I am not talking about fairness, I said. I am talking about truth. You have been letting her shape your silence, baby. And the man I raised was not afraid to speak when something was wrong. He stared down at the cup in his hands. The firelight flickered across his face. And for a moment, I saw my boy again. The same one who used to run to me after scraping his knee, looking for comfort. Mama, he said quietly, I do not know how to fix this. I reached over, touched his hand. You do not fix people, baby. You just tell the truth and live with what comes of it. He looked up then, his eyes wet. She means well, Ma. I smiled sadly. Meaning well and doing well are not the same thing. He nodded slowly, but I could tell he was torn. His heart was a rope pulled in 2 directions. One side tied to his wife, the other to the woman who raised him. That night, after he went to bed, I stayed in the den. The fire had gone out, but I did not move. The house was quiet again, but it was not the same kind of quiet as before. This time it felt like the calm that comes right before a storm. The next morning I woke to find my door closed tight. When I tried to open it, it would not budge. The handle turned, but something heavy was pressed against it from the outside. My heart started racing. Kendra, I called. What is going on? After a moment, I heard her footsteps. Oh, sorry, Mama, she said, her voice too light. Some boxes must have fallen in the hallway. I will move them in a second. I stood there, my hand still on the knob, realizing just how far things had gone. She was no longer just trying to control me. She was testing how far she could push. When she finally opened the door, she smiled as if nothing had happened. "You should be careful. Would not want you tripping." I stared at her for a long time before saying quietly, "You are playing a dangerous game, child." She tilted her head. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said softly, "that people who build their peace on someone else's misery do not stay peaceful for long." She laughed it off, but I saw the flicker in her eyes again, that fear that comes when someone realizes they have gone too far. And right then, I knew the balance had shifted. I was no longer the quiet, helpless mother in the corner. I had something she did not, the truth, and I was no longer afraid to let it breathe. The morning after that strange, silent night, the house carried a heaviness that settled into the walls like a sickness. It was too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from peace, but the kind that comes before something breaks. I woke early, before the sun. The air was cold, sharp enough to sting my lungs when I breathed in. I sat by the window with my shawl around my shoulders, watching the frost form tiny flowers on the glass. Somewhere in the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed. Steady, constant, like a heartbeat. I could feel it coming. The truth. It had been pacing the edges of this house for weeks, waiting for someone brave enough to open the door and let it in. Around 7, I heard footsteps, heavy ones, my son's. He walked down the hall slower than usual, as if he were carrying something inside that weighed more than his bones could bear. Then came Kendra's voice, sharp and bright like glass breaking. "I told you already. Don't make this a big deal." I stayed still. The argument rolled down the hallway and into the kitchen, words tumbling over each other. "I'm not trying to make it a big deal," my son said, his voice tired. "I just need to understand what's happening. Mama said she couldn't open her door this morning." "Oh, that?" Kendra laughed, forced and brittle. "That was nothing. I told her some boxes tipped over. Why is she blowing everything up?" "Because it's not the first time," he said. Silence. Then softer. "Are you saying you believe her over me?" "No," he said. "I'm saying I don't know who to believe anymore." That silence right there, that 1 second of stillness, was when the truth cracked open like an egg. I rose from my chair, wrapped my shawl tighter, and walked slowly to the kitchen. My feet made no sound on the old wood floors. But when I turned the corner, they both looked up. My son stood by the table, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Kendra stood near the sink, arms crossed, her face hard, but her eyes restless. "Morning," I said quietly. "Mama." My son started. "We were just—" "I heard," I said. "And I think it's time we stop walking around this thing and call it what it is." Kendra's chin lifted. "And what's that supposed to mean?" I met her gaze. "It means you've been trying to make me look crazy. Little things every day, moving my belongings, hiding my medicine, whispering things when you think I can't hear. You've been trying to wear me down, child, and for a while you almost did." Her mouth fell open. "You are making things up." I shook my head. "No, I've been keeping track." From the pocket of my sweater, I pulled out a small folded notebook, worn and soft from use. "Every day I wrote it down," I said, opening it. "Every time something went missing. Every time you spoke to me in that tone that said, 'I was less than you. You thought I was old and forgetful. But I may be old, Kendra. I'm not blind." Kendra took a small step back. "You're twisting things." "I never—" My son held up a hand. "Kendra, just let her talk. She turned to him, eyes wide. "You're really going to stand there and let her accuse me like this?" He didn't answer. That silence, that quiet pause between them, was the loudest sound in the room. I turned another page in the notebook. The day you told me I was forgetting things. You remember that? You said I left the stove on. I didn't. I checked it twice. You turned it back yourself when I went upstairs. I saw you through the reflection in the window. Her jaw tightened. Then 2 nights later, I continued, you told him I'd lost my ring. Said you found it behind the couch. But it wasn't lost. It was in your dresser drawer. I saw it when I helped fold the laundry. Kendra's lips trembled, but she kept her face composed. You have no proof. Proof? I smiled sadly. Baby, proof don't always come on paper. Sometimes proof lives in how your voice shakes when you lie. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting to my son, pleading, desperate. But he just looked at her, really looked, for the first time in months. Kendra, he said quietly, did you do it? What? She barked. No, she's manipulating you. She's been jealous ever since I came into your life. That one word, jealous, hit me like a slap. I laughed softly. Jealous? Of what, sweetheart? Of being young? Of having a husband who doesn't look at you the way he used to? Of living in a house that don't feel like home because the truth keeps knocking at your door? Her face went pale. You don't understand, she whispered. You came here and changed everything. You made him doubt me. I shook my head slowly. No, Kendra. I didn't make him doubt you. You did that yourself. Tears filled her eyes, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were fear. Fear of being seen. Fear of losing control. She turned to my son again. You can't let her do this. You can't let her stay. He looked down. His shoulders slumped, and his voice came out low. I think Mama's right. She stepped back as if he'd struck her. What? He ran a hand through his hair. I've been seeing things, too. The way you talk to her. The way you move things around. I didn't want to believe it, but now I can't ignore it. Her face hardened, all softness gone. So that's it? You're taking her side? He looked at her for a long, painful moment. I'm taking the truth side. That's when she snapped. She grabbed the notebook from my hand, ripping a few pages before my son caught her wrist. Enough, he said, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard. Stop this! The torn pages fluttered to the floor, thin little wings of confession. Kendra broke down, sobbing, collapsing into a chair. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she cried. I just wanted my house back. I felt like I was disappearing. I looked at her, really looked. For a moment I saw not a cruel woman, but a lost one, someone drowning in her own bitterness. I knelt beside her, my old knees trembling. You could have just asked for help, I said softly. But you chose pride instead of peace. She looked up, mascara streaked, eyes red. I'm sorry, I nodded. Sorry doesn't fix trust, but it's a start. The room stayed still for a long time. My son leaned against the counter, tears in his eyes, staring at the woman he thought he knew. Finally, I stood and said, I'll pack a few things. I'll stay with Ruth for a few days. Y'all need time to think. Mama, no. He started, but I raised my hand. It's all right, baby. Sometimes stepping away is how you remind folks what your presence truly meant. As I turned to leave, Kendra whispered, What happens now? I looked back at her. Now? The truth sits with us, and the truth don't leave until it's been heard. When I closed that front door behind me, the winter air hit my face like cold water, but it felt cleansing. For the first time in months, I could breathe. The poison was out. And though it left a bitter taste, I knew healing, real healing, had finally begun. It had been 3 days since I left that house. 3 days of silence, sweet and heavy. The kind of quiet that feels like a blanket after a storm. I was staying with my oldest friend, Ruth. Her house always smelled like cinnamon and cedarwood. She did not ask many questions. She just put a cup of tea in my hand and let me rest. But rest does not come easy when your heart is bruised by your own blood. Every morning, I sat by Ruth's kitchen window watching her cat chase shadows across the porch and wondered what was happening back home. I kept thinking about my son, my sweet boy, who used to run home from school just to sit by my side and tell me about his day. Somewhere along the way, I had lost that version of him. Somewhere along the way, that woman had convinced him to see me as a burden instead of a blessing. Ruth said one morning, "You cannot stay quiet forever, girl. Sometimes silence is good, but sometimes it gives evil a place to grow." I nodded, stirring my tea. I know, Ruth. I just want him to see it for himself. I want him to hear that house speak. She gave me a long look, that old wise look only a lifelong friend can give. "You think the truth has a voice?" I smiled. "Oh, baby, it does. The truth got a sound you cannot mistake once you've heard it." That afternoon my phone rang. It was my son. His voice was shaky, softer than I remembered. "Mama," he said, I think I made a mistake." I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence pulls more truth out than questions ever could. "She left," he said after a pause. "Packed her things and went to her sister's. Said she needed time away. I think she knew I was done believing her lies." My hand trembled as I held the phone. "And you? How are you holding up?" he sighed. "Lost. I don't even know how to be in this house anymore. Everything feels wrong." I closed my eyes. "Because the house is telling the truth now, baby. It's showing you everything you didn't want to see before." He was quiet for a long while. Then he whispered, "Will you come home, Mama?" I hesitated. My heart said yes, but my spirit said, "Not yet." "I will come when the time feels right," I told him. "For now you sit in that truth. You let it echo in those walls until you understand what it cost." He started to cry softly, and I just listened. Sometimes that's all a mother can do. Listen while her child faces the reflection he helped create. 2 more days passed. Then, one cold morning, Ruth called out, "Somebody's at the door for you." It was him, standing there, shoulders slumped, eyes red, looking like that same little boy who once brought me dandelions from the yard and called them flowers. "Mama," he said, voice breaking, "I can't do this without you." I didn't make him beg. I just wrapped my shawl around my shoulders, picked up my small bag, and went home. The drive was quiet. He tried to speak a few times, but the words died in his throat. I just kept watching the road, the bare trees, the faded sky, the long gray stretch leading back to that house. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked different, still and cold but not angry, like it was waiting. Inside, everything was too neat. The table was cleared, the curtains washed, the air heavy with lemon cleaner. I could almost hear the silence breathing. He stood in the living room, hands in his pockets, looking around like a stranger in his own home. "I thought cleaning would help," he said. "But it still feels like something's missing." I touched the back of one of the dining chairs, the same chair where Kendra once sat and told me to stop pretending. My fingers traced the wood slowly. "Because the house remembers," I said. "These walls, they hold what we do. They remember kindness, and they remember cruelty, too. He sank into a chair, his voice barely above a whisper. I let her treat you that way, Mama. I let it happen right in front of me. I sat across from him. You let it happen because you were scared to lose peace. But peace built on silence is just a quiet kind of pain. He nodded, tears in his eyes. She said you were trying to control everything, that you wanted me to choose you over her. I sighed deeply, and she was wrong. A mother's love don't compete, baby. It just wants space to exist. He broke down then, covering his face with his hands. I don't know how to fix this. You start by listening, I said gently. Not just to me, but to yourself. To what this house been trying to tell you. Right then, a sudden creak came from the hallway. The same old floorboard that always groaned when someone passed. Only now, it sounded louder, clearer, like a voice rising after being ignored too long. He looked up, startled. You heard that? I smiled faintly. Yes, the house is speaking. It is reminding you what truth sounds like. We sat there in the stillness, both of us listening. Somewhere in that quiet, the house stopped feeling haunted. Later that night, as I fixed a small pot of soup, just like I used to when he was a boy, he came into the kitchen and stood by the counter. I want you to stay, Mama, he said. This house needs you. I stirred the soup slowly. Maybe it does, but what it really needs is honesty. If you can promise that, maybe it can heal. He nodded firmly. I promise. That night, for the first time in months, I slept under that roof without feeling afraid. The house no longer pressed down on me. It just breathed, slow and tired, but alive again, still. In the back of my mind, I knew something was unfinished. You can throw out a person, but not their shadow. And in that shadow, something still waited, cold and restless. Because when lies live long enough, they don't die easy. They linger. They whisper. As I drifted off to sleep, I heard a faint knock on the door, gentle but certain. My son stirred. Who could that be at this hour? I looked at the door and whispered, Sometimes, baby, truth don't come all at once. Sometimes it knocks again. The knock on that door came soft at first, like the wind brushing its fingers against the wood, but it carried a weight I could feel in my bones. My son walked toward it, but I held up my hand. Wait, I said gently. Let me open it. He looked at me, confused, but he stepped aside. I turned the knob slowly. The night air slipped in cold and quiet. And there she was, Kendra. She looked smaller somehow, like all that anger had melted off and left only what was underneath. A tired, fragile woman. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her eyes red, her hands twisting around a folded piece of paper. Mama, she whispered, voice trembling. I did not know where else to go. For a long moment, I just stood there studying her. The same woman who had humiliated me in front of my family, who had looked me dead in the eyes and told me to stop pretending. And yet, in that moment, she looked nothing like that person. Behind me, my son stepped forward, his voice low. Kendra, why are you here? She looked at him, tears spilling down her face. I messed up, Derek. I messed up bad. He didn't say a word. He just leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching her. She turned back to me. Can I come in? I hesitated. Every part of me wanted to shut that door, to keep her on the porch where her cold choices belonged. But something deeper, something older, the kind of grace a mother carries even when her heart has been broken, made me open that door wide. Come on in, I said softly. She stepped inside like a child entering a church, looking around as if the house might still judge her. The warmth from the fireplace wrapped around her shoulders, but she still shivered. We all sat in the living room. Me in my old armchair, Derek on the edge of the sofa, and Kendra across from us, her hands clenched in her lap. She took a deep breath. "I came to say I'm sorry," she said. "Not the kind of sorry you say when you get caught. The kind that hurts to say because you finally see what you did." I said nothing. I just listened. She continued, voice shaking. "I kept thinking about that day. The mop, the dinner, the way I talked to you like you were nothing. I was angry, but not at you. I was angry at my life. Angry that I didn't feel good enough for your son, for this house, for myself." She wiped her eyes. "And when you came here, you reminded me of everything I was not. Strong, kind, loved. So instead of learning from you, I tried to tear you down." My son's eyes filled with tears, but he said quietly, "You almost lost everything." "Kendra," she nodded. "I know, I already have. I have been staying with my sister, and I keep waking up hearing your mother's voice in my head. Not the angry one I imagined, but the calm one, the one that never fought back even when I deserved it." Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper in her hands. "I wrote this for you," she said, placing it on the table. "It's not much, but I needed to write it down." I looked at the paper but did not touch it. "What does it say?" I asked. She looked down. "It says that I was wrong, that you were never a burden, never pretending. You were just trying to keep this family together while I was trying to pull it apart." For the first time since she walked in, I felt a tear roll down my cheek. "It takes a strong heart to admit you were cruel," I said softly, "but it takes an even stronger one to change." She looked up at me, eyes filled with something close to hope. "Do you think I can change?" I leaned forward slowly, my old hands resting on my knees. "Anybody can change, child, but scars do not vanish just because we wish them away. They remind us where we went wrong." She nodded, her face crumpling. "I know. I just hope one day you can forgive me." I took a long breath. Forgiveness is not a gift for you, Kendra. It is a release for me, and I am tired of carrying your hurt inside my heart. Her lip trembled. "Does that mean you forgive me?" I smiled gently. "It means I am learning how." For a moment, none of us spoke. The house creaked softly. The fire whispered. And in that quiet, something in the air shifted. Not completely healed, but no longer raw. After a while, Derek stood and said, "You can stay for the night, but things will not be like before." Kendra nodded. "I understand." She rose to leave, but before she did, she turned to me again. "Thank you for opening the door, Mama." I watched her go, standing in the doorway just long enough to see her fade into the dark streetlight's glow. When I closed the door this time, I felt no anger, just a deep, steady peace. Later that night, as I sat in bed, I unfolded that paper she had left on the table. Her handwriting was messy and uneven, but the words were clear. "I took from you the one thing that mattered. Respect, and you gave it back to me without asking for anything in return. I hope one day I can deserve the kindness you showed me." I folded it again and placed it in my Bible. Not because I wanted to remember her pain, but because I needed to remember that sometimes healing looks nothing like what we imagined. The next morning, Derek and I sat on the porch, coffee steaming in our cups, the sun soft and gold through the trees. He said, "Do you think she will come back?" I smiled faintly. "Maybe. But this time, if she does, the house will be watching, and so will we." He nodded slowly, then said, "I do not deserve you, Mama." I reached over and squeezed his hand. You were never meant to deserve me, baby. You were meant to learn from me. That is what family is. Lessons passed through pain, until love finds its way back. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the world wake up. That house had seen shame, anger, and betrayal. But it had also seen forgiveness bloom in its cracks. It would never forget, and maybe it was not supposed to, because some scars are not meant to fade. They stay like soft reminders that love, real love, is not about perfection. It is about choosing peace, even when the wound still aches. As the wind brushed through the porch railings, I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for giving me the strength to stay gentle in a world that wanted me bitter." The story did not end that morning. It just changed shape, from pain into wisdom, from silence into voice. And somewhere deep inside, I knew one truth that would never leave me. Sometimes, the people who break you the deepest are the ones who end up teaching you how to heal. The scar never vanished, but it stopped bleeding, and that, child, is enough.